Good evening. It is 7:02, and we'll call this meeting into order on February 27th, 2023. This is a public meeting of the City of Portland's Accountability Commission Subcommittee on Reporting and Transparency. If the Spanish language interpreters Luisa and Maria, can you please give the information on Spanish language interpretation?
Ya. Buenas noches. Es una reunión de la Comisión de Responsabilidad Policíaca, el Subcomité de Informe y Transparencia. Son las 7:02 de la tarde. Para esta reunión hay interpretación en español. Necesitan darle abajo en un botón que va a aparecer para Languages y ponen Spanish, ¿verdad? Para que nos vayamos todos al canal de español. Me van a poder escuchar a mí y ver a la persona que está hablando, pero me va a escuchar a mí, no a ellos. Okay.
Thank you. Let's see. Thank you. The city the city also offers ASL interpretation, which is provided by, looks like Amanda and I can't see who the other one is. Sorry. But thank you for your work. Oh, Amanda and Andrea. Thank you. Please pin their video feed to see their being provided. Oh, excuse me. Thank you. The city also offers ASL interpretation, which is also being provided by Andrea and Amanda. Please pin their video feed to see their interpretation through the meeting. The closed caption is turned on in Zoom as another means of assistance. Please note that the automatic captioning service is not always accurate. The city supports access to meetings of the Police Accountability Commission and can provide other language support as well. Please email in advance of future public meetings, either as a response to public meetings notice or directly to policeaccountability@portlandoregon.gov to ask for assistance, access to assistance, including interpretations in other languages. This meeting is a public meeting and is subject to the City of Portland's Administrative Code and Oregon state law is being recorded. For this meeting, the chat function is enabled for commissioner members to communicate with each other. Members of the public will be able to ask questions using Zoom's QA feature. And as the commissioners are presenting and discussing things, if attendees have questions, please feel free to submit them through the Q&A. We hope to use this feature to guide our conversation during the meeting and future meeting and agenda topics. We like to be clear that not all questions will be answered during the meeting, but if answered, both the question and the answer will be visible to you and will be part of the public record or the meeting record. To access this feature, just click on the Q&A icon in the middle of the screen. And now I will pass it to the co-chairs for the land acknowledgement.
Good evening. My name is Connie Wan. I'm co-chair of this particular portion. We acknowledge that the rivers, lakes, streams, and lands of the lower Willamette River rest upon the occupied territories of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Cathamelet, Clackamas, Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes. We recognize that the many villages, traditions, cultures, and relationships that existed along the river since time immemorial. We recognize that these tribes stewarded these lands and rivers since time immemorial for future generations. We recognize and undertake responsibility for the destruction of the river and the land, of traditional food sources, sacred places, and multifaceted ways of life. We acknowledge the economic and social values that enabled the harm to the river, including systemic racism, classism, and many other systems of oppression that perpetuated harm against Black, Indigenous, and immigrant communities along the river. With this acknowledgement, we commit to honoring and learning from the past and working towards a more equitable and sustainable future for the lower Willamette River. We commit to seeking solutions that acknowledge the inequities of the past socioeconomic policies and the harm done to the people and our relationships to these lands and waters. And with
Thank
that, I'll turn it back to.
Thank you,
IMC.
Commissioner Connie. So we have the community agreements. I'm just take a few moments for y'all to read the first part. And then we can go to the next slide. So do we all commit to the following community agreements for today's meeting and to gently call in our colleagues and collaborators as needed or if needed? Great, I'm committed to that too. Thank you. So then I will pass it over to the co-chairs once again to discuss the timeline.
I'm Debbie Iona, one of the other co-chair for this subcommittee. This meeting is, so I'm just going to talk about the timeline. This meeting is a part of the Police Accountability Commission's structure and details phase of work, which focuses on the form of the new system. Future phases of work will develop how the new system relates to the rest of the city government and the transition plan from our current system to the new one. The commission will present all proposed changes to the city council later in 2023 for their consideration and approval.
And I think there's another, this slide here shows the outcome documents for the structure and detail phase based on the agenda and scope by the commission. This subcommittee focuses on how new oversight board and agency will ensure the public and city council are aware of what the new system is doing, including reporting and transparency requirements. Turn it back to the co-chair.
Okay, and that is slide, I'm looking at a Word document, so I can't see the slide, but I'm assuming this is slide 9. This slide is the current project plan for the structure and details phase of the Police Accountability Commission's work. It will be updated as needed throughout this phase of work. This slide is for members of the public to be able to understand how the commission gets from now through the end of the phase, which focuses on identifying areas of agreement among commission members as to the form the new system will take. Today's meeting is part of the gold box with the red border near the bottom left of the screen. And then, assuming we're going to go to slide 10. And so following today, here are the upcoming meetings of the PAC. We'd like to highlight this subcommittee will meet next Monday, March 6th, and is tentatively scheduled to meet the following 2 Thursdays, March 16th and 23rd. And then you can see that there's the other subcommittee meetings are coming up as well. And then today's, keep going. Okay, so then slide 11 and then 12. Okay, today's meeting agenda includes subcommittee member introductions, working through the subcommittee's mandate and relevant information, open discussion on what should end up in the eventual areas of agreement on reporting and transparency, and public comment. And then introductions are next. So
Yep.
Connie and I have already done our introduction, so I'll leave you how you meet to get everybody else on task on that.
Thank you, Commissioner Iona. Okay, how about we start with Commissioner Husani, and then can you pass it to the next person just to give a brief introduction of who you are and move it on.
Greetings, everybody. My name is Sima Husseini. I go by the pronouns of he, him, his. I am obviously a commission member and a member of the subcommittee. I am pretty much a community organizer. My focus is with Black, Muslim, immigrant and refugee communities. And specifically within that realm has been civil rights issues, as well as obviously how negatively impacted these communities are by policing. And should
we'll
I
pass it
popcorn?
on? Yep, please
All
pass it to
right.
the next commissioner.
And I will pass it on to Christian.
Hey, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Christian or Christian. I use open to any pronouns. Most people use they or he, which is totally fine, but open to whatever. And I'm a commission member and a local artist. I've done some community work as well, here and there, a little bit with Apana, some mutual aid project stuff, facilitations for schools and whatnot with the nonprofits, stuff like that. That is me. And I will pass it to, I think, is Faith on this, right?
Yes. Thank you,
Cool.
Commissioner Christian.
I'll pass it to Faith. Thank you.
Hi, Christian. Thanks. Good evening. Hi, I'm Faith Aiken. I use she, her pronouns. Commission member. During the day, I'm an analyst. And I'm a person with a disability. And I am interested in transparency. So I thought this would be a great little subcommittee to join. So thanks, Connie and Debbie, for leading us. And I think, Catherine, it's all you.
Thank you and good evening, everybody. I'm Catherine McDowell. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a lawyer, and during the day I do energy regulatory work. I have my own law firm, a small business in downtown Portland. And as a volunteer, I do and have done a lot of civil rights work. So that's my connection to this work. I've done a lot of, well, at least most relevant to this commission, I've done a lot of legal observer work, organizing legal observers, particularly during the big protests over the last few years. So I think that's everything, and I'll turn it back over to our co-chairs whose efforts to organize this, and really appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll actually take over from here. First, the subcommittee will review the commission's mandate as it relates to issues and the subcommittee itself, as well as its timeline and how to relate to other subcommittees for the first part. And then I'll
share if that's okay with you. Thank you very much. So I'm going to focus on in this first part and transparency is. So looking at the council resolutions that set up the commission, resolution 37527 empowers the commission with to craft and provide city council recommendations for the details for establishing a new police oversight system and with developing the structure and processes of the new oversight system. It has an exhibit to it, which allows the commission and subcommittees to invite experts to come in and brief, as well as to work with the city attorney's office and Office of Equity and Human Rights to ensure the recommendations consider equity goals and comply with legal requirements. The other resolution that set up the commission is resolution 37548, which officially created it, and it says it tasks the commission with identified scope of work for the commission, much of which has been done in other parts of the in previous phases. To work on this. And then within that, the subcommittee itself, on February 9th, the full commission created this subcommittee. And in that, went over all the different things that needed to be done, including that phrase that you just saw from the resolution 37548, and specifically tasked this purple content over on the right under the commission's agenda and scope was assigned to this subcommittee. What information will be in reports, what reports are public, what meetings are open to the public, and what info on investigations is public. The timeline for this subcommittee starts today and most of the month of March. It's likely to have 4 meetings today, which is February 27th, next Monday, March 6th, and the following 2 Thursdays, March 16th and 23rd, with the draft document ideally referred to the full commission in time for the full commission to start discussing it on March 30th. And the only other thing on this section is how the subcommittee interacts with the other 2 subcommittees for this phase of work. And that's likely to be fairly minimal. It's that the staff of the oversight agency may develop reports. And that's this middle column of text that you see here. And what the minimum content is for those reports is going to be discussed in this subcommittee. So I'll pause here before we go on to reviewing the text. Any questions or thoughts before moving on? Great. And the second part is a bit shorter and relates to the charter. So please bear with me. There's a lot of different colors in here, but the purple, again, is the relevant content. And so this is section 2-10 of the city charter, which was approved by the voters in November 2020. And lots of different parts in here and different subcommittees or phases of work addressing things. The only relevant sentence in here is the one purple sentence here. The board shall make provisions for regular and open meetings, public transparency, and reporting on the board's activities. And that is the starting point for everything within the context of this subcommittee. There's also several other documents which we'll be going over in just a moment under the co-chair's notes. But yeah, pause here and pass it back over to facilitators and co-chairs.
Thank you, staff. Okay, so next we will discuss the content framework for the subcommittees, which means content for the subcommittees will need to discuss and arrange, or engage with as a part of developing drafts and agreements on reporting and transparency. I will pass this back again to co-chairs or staff.
So
Yes. Just before you stop.
go ahead. Thanks, Samir. Yeah.
Sorry, just before you before we switch screen share, just real quick, please follow our normal discussion rules. Please be brief, allow our facilitators to facilitate. We do use a weighted stack, and please be I'm going to switch over to the document. Debbie, if that's okay with you.
So I worked on this over the weekend, and you should have gotten the subcommittee members should have gotten a copy in their city email on Saturday. So what I just thought I'd give us a head start on working on this. And so the first thing I covered kind of relates back to Exhibit A that Samir showed us. Oh, so the idea is we thought we would go through this, and as we look at each section, because it has excerpts from the scope and agenda, the independent police review code, the areas of agreement, practices to consider from subject matter experts and from the jurisdictions. Anything I could find that had anything to do with reporting or transparency, I copied. And I mean, a lot of it's going to be like, we can just, get right, dispose of it. But I think we can pick out ideas that we want to consider for our areas of agreement on these two topics. And so what we thought we'd do is Connie and I will bounce back and forth going through all of this material, and want our subcommittee members then to read it. And when you see something that you think, oh, we should we should use that in our areas of agreement, or think about using it, then, or if it prompts other ideas, say something. But Samir is going to highlight the things that we find that are useful for considering, and he's going to use his color coded with the purple for our group. And so that's the plan. Does anybody have any questions, comments, something you'd like to do differently? Okay, well then let's get going. So that first part really of the scope and agenda just essentially gives us our instructions on what we're supposed to be doing. And so the new boards reports we need to come up with a description of the new boards reports to council and how they are made and what information will be in them. And then as far as public access and transparency is what reports are public, what meetings are open to the public, and what information on investigations is public. So starting with the city code, I'll do this first part and then hand off the next part to Connie. So this first part is the powers and duties of the IPR. And so it starts right off in B, please read this section B to yourself, and then we'll find out who, what you find in here that we really need to include in our areas of agreement. Did anybody have any comment on this, on section B here about what we want to pull out of this?
The only thing I'm noticing is it doesn't address like body cam footage, but it might be because of whenever this was created, the date.
Right, yeah, because right when this was written, the city didn't have body, well, they still don't. So
right, but hopefully it's going to be something that we
right.
should
So I don't know if somebody, Samir, I don't know how hard it is for you to I think body cam footage ended up in the officer accountability. I don't know if anybody remembers. It feels like it's been addressed someplace, but it looks like Samir has the answer to that.
Yeah, so this the access to body camera footage and really anything that relates to the oversight system having access to information, receiving information, was under the access to information document from the last phase of work, which is powers and duties. And this subcommittee is more about the information that leaves the oversight system going to the public or to the city council. And just as a quick side note, their officer accountability does include a little bit of related info as well, which is what information goes to complainants during the process of their complaint, as well as to officers during the process of a complaint that they may be subject to.
Okay, thank you. Well, so it seems to be in this section, if we're talking about when information goes to the public, then the first paragraph, I think up to where it starts off, yeah, in performing is when it ends. Does anybody have any different thoughts about that? No, okay, Connie, you want to do F?
Sure. I think the request is that people read it to themselves, right?
Oh, before you go, Connie, Commissioner Connie, Commissioner Faith has their hand up.
Oh,
Thanks, Connie. Okay. I have two questions. One is sort of general and I'm sorry, I know we reviewed this last subcommittee, but as we pull from IPR. No, this is a bigger question. I'll ask it in the full commission. Okay. The second part of my question is I actually want to highlight more of this. It would be great to have, so not just obviously IPR doesn't need access, but I'd like the public to have access to raw data, tabulated summary statistics, other source materials. So that would be my suggestion to highlight, is that it's not just synthesized information, but that the public would have available raw data. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Good idea.
We lost the page. There we go. Thank you.
So picking up with F. So please read to yourselves and then we'll discuss. So I think that we need to figure out which parts of this will extrapolate and continue forward into our sort of presentation. Does anyone want to make any suggestions for F? Okay. So I guess we skip it and move on to
No.
H.
Commissioner McDowell.
Has her hand
Oh,
up.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. We got to get used to the
Yeah.
So I was just going to just communicate that I think that that paragraph was addressed in the officer accountability document. It feels like as a part of like handling complaints, we address the communications that would occur both with the complainant and the member. So my belief is that that is pretty fully subsumed already in the officer accountability report. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
And I can do H.
Okay.
Recommend policy changes. So yeah, read this part to yourself. So I'm just going to jump in here. And I think I want to ask a question of Samir, but first, I think clearly that last sentence in H is something that would be information that is shared with the public. So that should be highlighted. And then, okay, Samir, so IPR will evaluate complaint and other information. So would this fall under reporting, or is this, do we have, is one of our things that we're going to be working on is like evaluation, or is reporting and evaluation in the same subject area?
Go ahead, Samir.
Yeah, so I think I think this entire section is actually under structural oversight, and maybe co-chair of that subcommittee, Faith, might have more to add if I'm wrong on that. But I think the entire thing is in there. It may not hurt to reiterate this last point, you know, in the context of approaching it from the angle of being open to the public, as opposed to developing the recommendation, which is the angle it was in there.
Commissioner Faith.
I agree. Debbie, I'm sure you remember this, that this was in our final document. I think the added piece here would be, I don't know that we addressed like policy decisions. So we addressed that policy recommendations from the board would be public, but we didn't follow-up of like when a policy, what happens. So I think there's an opportunity here to make that explicit, that not only are the recommendations made public, but when a final decision is made, that that's tied up.
Thank you, Commissioner Faith. I guess what I'm wondering is, have we covered that we're going to want the oversight agency to take the complaint and other information? I guess that was in the policy review. This isn't really about, and because this is more about practices, not data. Because I was thinking, oh, we might want to say that as far as reporting goes, that we want them to look at data related to complaints, like what kind of complaint, what's the variety of complaints that come in. And I know in the IPR reports, the annual reports, they will put the demographic data of people who complain. And so I think at some point we do need to look at some reports from other jurisdictions and come up with a list of subjects that we want to make sure that the reporting covers. But I think, yeah, this particular sentence maybe doesn't quite cover that. So I think maybe we're ready to go on to I.
Okay, I, outreach. So go ahead and read to yourselves and we'll discuss.
Any comments or questions about I?
I'm going to vote to have this in our areas of agreement, especially the that second part, hold public meetings to hear general concerns about police services. And I guess, I mean, informing the public would mean the first half of this would, we want to make sure that the public knows this oversight board is there to accept their complaints and want to make it as accessible to as possible and educate them on the importance of, I would vote, I think putting the whole thing in there seems good, but welcome other people's thoughts.
Commissioner Sima?
Yeah, I know that this is not the time and space for it, but again, when it comes to language accessibility, I am really interested in understanding what tools are going to be used to ensure this, because it's a big promise and it's one that we should be promising. But again, the tools are very uncoordinated and so this will be a lift when it comes down to deciding and planning on how we successfully execute that.
Thank you. Okay, I think I've already lost track.
We're in J.
Oh, J. Okay. Oh, that's a J. Sorry, I can't see.
Yeah,
it.
it's really hard to tell.
I think so. This is the review of closed investigations, and it relates to the way right now the IPR hires somebody to review closed investigations. And now that I'm looking at this again, like I said, I just grabbed everything I could find when I did this. We definitely covered in structural oversight. So, and I think we talked about presenting the report to the city council and the public in the structural oversight one. I don't know if we have to, this is what there's so much overlap on some of this. It's hard to know. I mean, I think maybe we should be including that second sentence about IPR shall issue reports on an annual basis, identifying policy related issues that come out of this expert review of shootings. So, yeah. I guess we're just going to end up with redundancies in these things, and we'll, when we pull it all together, have to, we can discard the duplications.
I also think it's okay to consider, being redundant, and that some people might consider this transparency and some might consider this structural. It's like, that's the thing, how people relate to it is not entirely ours to decide, I guess.
Yeah, okay. Okay, is everybody okay with us highlighting that one? Okay,
Let's see.
all right, so I think this one's yours, Connie.
M?
Yep.
Okay. So this one addresses additional public reports. Please read to yourself and we'll discuss. Yeah, feels pretty straightforward. Was this addressed in any of the other subcommittees?
I see a shaking of no's.
Okay, so then I think that this needs to probably be added to our transparency documentation.
And I think this could get kind of lumped in with the, you know, I think we want to define to a certain extent what the annual reports have in them. And so like member misconduct trends and disciplinary practices seems like that would be something you want to have in your annual report. So I think eventually we're going to come across all these different things, and then we can come up with a list that could be included in the code of this is annual report. These are at a minimum, these are the things that need to be in it. And then of course they can, you know, put more, but yeah, at least we want to put a kind of a baseline. Okay, so I'm powers and duties of the committee. A, the committee's duties and powers are the following, and then it's conduct meetings.
Can we scroll up a little bit? Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so this, to me, this then ties into the, if you go back, not that I want you to go back, but under the agenda and scope, they talked about which meetings should be open to the public. And also, I think that the commission, I mean, the new oversight board should comply with Oregon Public Meetings Law, and that their committee meetings should be open, open to the public. Anybody have any follow-up thoughts about that?
That sounds accurate. I don't know about obviously the quorum number is not.
No, yeah, I think that's not our job.
Yep.
That's the other subcommittee's job, so we don't have to worry about that, luckily. Okay, so why don't you do 3?
Okay, recommend policy changes. Hmm.
Any questions about this particular section?
No.
Commissioner Christian?
Thanks. I'm curious if these recommended policy changes are something that we might want to consider being public record. I know it doesn't say it in here. I don't know if that's even, so that maybe not be possible. I'm just curious if that crossed anyone's mind. That crosses my mind when I read this. If it's something that the future board might want to make public knowledge, or at least like the history of them, maybe, if not the actual changes as they're being suggested.
Staff?
So I would assume that if they have to present it, if it gets presented to city council, then it would be public. Because usually when there's reports like that, they present them to the city council. I see Samir's hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, as public officials, the members of the oversight board, you know, if they send an email back and forth, that's all public record. So, you know, that could be requested or anything like that. And then in terms of like the additional level of transparency about, publishing something is another component of this too. And that would be exactly as Co-Chair Debbie pointed out, if it's being presented to the city council, it's definitely public. Now, if it just goes to the police chief and the police chief accepts it, that isn't necessarily going to be at a public, city council meeting, and that's something that this subcommittee could address. I will note that all of this is addressed in the structural oversight document as well, but I figured I should answer the questions about public recordness first.
Thank you. So then, okay, so looking at number 5 then, about appeals, did we cover that in structural oversight too? This is so terrible. I was on that subcommittee and I can't remember anything.
The first part of it through the semicolon right there was under officer accountability.
Okay, good.
But it, the second part in here was, I don't believe explicitly stated in that document.
So we should capture that. Because that's clearly publicly report findings is, yeah, something we want to make sure we do. Okay, sorry, Commissioner Connie, I don't remember whose turn it was, but you do 6 since I hit that one.
No problem. Okay, outreach to the public. That sounds like something that should be, extracted, carried over.
I agree. Anybody else have any comments on that one? Okay.
Oopsie.
Okay, so now we're on the intake section. So start with little letter C. It's about, oh, right, I remember when I pulled this out. This seemed like a good transparency thing to have the contact information on the police police officers' business cards, so that if people aren't happy with what happened, they have an easy way to find the new oversight board.
Any other comments? And go to big C.
Yeah. So I guess this one's about the director.
Any comments? Questions? Extractions of this particular piece of documentation? Commissioner Fee?
Is this covered? I don't know that this feels important, but I don't know that it is relevant. And yeah,
because this sounds like stuff that you don't share with the public.
Right. It's
Yeah.
like the director's not
Yeah.
of transparency.
Right. There's some confidentiality things that are important, and that's what this is addressing. So I think we can. It seems like it doesn't fit into our scope.
So it's
Commissioner-
important, but not to this work here.
Commissioner Christian has their hand up.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, I think we may have said this before, but I just need a reminder, stuff like this that is not within our scope, where does it get addressed then in our work, not in our specific work, but in the work of the commission in general, committee in general.
Staff?
I thank you for the question, Christiane. I think that's sort of case by case. Kind of depends on where it would go. I actually think this one, if you look at access to information, there was a section there about how data would be protected and things sort of modulates or limits may not be the right word in that context, but it would be here. The way in which information is accessed over there. And so this actually might, at least the first part of it, I think the second part, the unhighlighted portion, is a different situation, but the first portion of it might be best addressed here. I can't think of another part of past, future, or current phases that would address it. It also could be something that is under the administrative rules, but it's currently in city code. So it doesn't necessarily make sense to lower it down to administrative rules from city code. It might, but not necessarily required. So I don't know if that answers your question, Commissioner Christian.
Yeah, it does. The reason I was asking was because I had the thought that if it's not addressed somewhere else, well, basically I was curious if we should have a section in our scope that is the limits of transparency, since we are covering transparency in general. So I'm open to adding this if that's the case. If not, if this will be addressed somewhere else, then it's totally fine. But if it's not going to be addressed anywhere else, that's the reason why I was asking, because I was like, maybe we do need to cover this. I was just curious.
Yeah, it does seem like it needs to be somewhere. And if there's nothing logical, then maybe your suggestion about putting it under limits to transparency would be a good solution. So it looks like Samir's got it highlighted for future reference. And then I noticed there's a Commissioner Handelman has there's two things. I'm going to start, has a comment here before we continue. I thought maybe says publishing recommendations. You all already flagged H in IPR powers. H, recommend policy changes. IPR will evaluate complaint and other information and investigation practices to make recommendations to the chief to prevent future problems. Policy change recommendations shall be published for public review. And then the second one, since the first part addresses keeping things confidential when requested, this is actually about transparency when things are not asked to be confidential. Okay. Let's read that again. So then it seems like, then this implies that unless you ask, your information maybe will be available to people.
When one requests.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess so if you don't request, then that means it's not confidential. Is that how you're reading it?
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, so this relates to transparency then, so we need to save it.
Commissioner Simov?
I'm just trying to better understand the second half of that sentence, except insofar as disclosures may be necessary to enable the director to carry out their duties or to comply with applicable collective bargaining agreements, or the disclosure of records is directed by the district attorney. So is that the caveat to to protecting the confidentiality of complainants? Is that like the way I see it, for instance, is like when there was the munitions ban, except when except if law enforcement agents call for call it a riot, then they can fire. Is this like in similar vein? Is that this the same type of caveat for from protecting confidentiality?
Staff says yes.
So I guess my question would be like, for the legal eagles out there, what is an example of a disclosure that may be necessary to enable the director to carry out their duties? You know, if we don't have that answer tonight, then
I was
maybe
going to say,
we can,
would you like to flag that for further discussion?
Yes.
Commissioner Seabaugh?
please.
And then did the commission make a decision about the second half of this paragraph? The unhighlighted portion, to be more clear.
Maybe we should just highlight it because we're kind of not sure exactly what all this means. In this particular
Right.
big letter C is a little bit confusing.
Okay. Commissioner Christian?
Sorry, I literally just lowered my hand because I was pretty much just going to say what Commissioner Iona said.
Okay.
I think we should just flag this for future discussion or as we get more clarity as time goes on. Yeah, because it seems like it's a little confusing.
Okay, so we're moving on to monitoring and reporting.
And then I would like to state after this section, we'll go to a 10-minute break to give you guys eyes a little bit of break and a bio break for everyone.
Okay,
Okay.
big letter A. Yeah, that feels,
Commissioner Sima?
I just wanted to read into record a statement from Dan Handelman in our audience to Big C from earlier. He stated that if an anonymous complaint comes in, but they need to get to get the person's name in order to investigate, for instance. Still open to discussing further, but that's a great start.
Thank you, Commissioner Sima.
And did we agree on A? That at least that, especially the part about informed complainants and members, well, maybe is that because that's internal to the complaint? That's not the same as informing the general public about things. So maybe this was already captured in.
yeah, I think he just wrote that it was addressed in an officer account.
Oh, good. Okay, thanks. Sorry. Everybody's pictures are on top of my the little column on the side. Okay, so we're to B now.
Mhm.
The director shall use complaint and OMF risk management division data to support the Bureau's early warning system. Now that seems kind of internal as opposed to informing the public. So I would think I'm going to vote for passing on that one. If anybody has any objection, say so.
I don't see any objections. Everyone's saying move on. So I guess that would put you at C.
C, yep.
Any comments on this particular section? Or should we move on to D?
So maybe this was part of the structural oversight because it's about policy recommendations as
Mhm.
opposed to reporting. So,
Mhm.
so I'm thinking maybe we should pass on that. Oh, actually, sorry, I can't read that side thing. Okay, you said we already addressed it. That's good. Okay, so Connie, are you supposed to do D or is it me?
I did C, but I'm happy to do D.
Oh, I can do D. I can't keep track. I'm sorry. Okay, so everybody read D. Okay, so this one seems like a pretty clear one that belongs in our
Yep.
part right here. Okay,
Okay. Any other questions or comments about section D before we go to our break? Okay, oh, support staff.
Yeah, just something that this is more of a flag for later. The A and D both talk about, sorry, not A. Oh no, yeah, A and D both talk about reporting, including the content of work done by internal affairs, and just something to keep in mind when you get to the part about minimum content inclusion requirements, whether or not that's something to include is probably a further discussion flag. Just wanted to mention it.
Commissioner McDowell.
Yeah, without, I don't want to delay our break unduly, but I just want to jump in and say that I was feeling that as we're going through here, that this really reflects a different model where the reporting is to the Bureau and reports about internal affairs and no reporting to like the auditor. I think because the presumption is that IPR exists within the auditor, and I feel like we should be considering the new structure where the board would be separate, and the reports, you want to consider reports to the auditor as kind of an inspector general type model, in addition to reports to the council. So just wanted to flag that as we're talking about. I agree with all the concepts we've saved here. I just want to be sure that I think we're thinking about the language in the IPR provisions, which is no longer applicable because of the new structure we're going to have. Thank you.
you're right. And then also, because the city council, the mayor will be in charge of the police chief, but then we have the separate city council, so we'll want to report to both the mayor and the city council. And right, I see what you're saying, right? We need to make sure to update this, what this says to reflect what we're going to be having starting in 2025. Thanks, Commissioner McDowell.
Okay, as soon as staff has finished typing that, I just want to make sure there isn't any other questions or comments, because that was definitely a good one. Okay, I don't see any other hands, so we will reconvene at 8:11 to give you a 10-minute break. Thank you. Oh, well, that was quick. I think a few members are still out since we said that it would be till 8:11. So they have technically 1 minute. So I'll give them a couple more minutes, like a minute to get in their seat before we start conducting business. Okay. We are back. And we have the document back on screen, please. Thank you.
Samir,
Yes.
I'd like to skip this and go on to the, I mean, come back to it later, but, I should have done it different. I think the jurisdiction subject matter experts are where we find the best ideas, so, maybe we should start with that.
Would you prefer to do subject matter experts first or other jurisdictions?
I actually like other jurisdiction better.
Okay,
Thanks.
no problem.
Okay, so I can start. Practices to consider from other jurisdictions. Public nature of meetings and hearings. G1, the oversight body holds meetings open and accessible to the public. Many jurisdictions include not only open public meetings of the oversight body, but written guarantees of communication about public notice, agenda item publication, etc. And then read the ideas from those 3 jurisdictions. Okay, any thoughts about the ideas in here?
I see a thumbs up from Commissioner Connie.
And I think some of this is probably covered by our public meetings law, but I think like the idea of giving it plenty of notice, like San Diego at 72 hours. I don't know what the rules are here exactly. But public input. Then they even have in New York, talks about some of the information that they share. They make sure that they know which commission members are in attendance on their meeting agendas. And then meeting summaries published after each meeting. It seems to me a lot of those are good ideas for making sure the public's well informed about what's going on. Any other thoughts?
I would agree.
Seems like everyone else is in agreement, or they're nodding heads.
Okay, Connie, you want to do a G3?
Sure. The oversight body has a set list of agenda items, which are by default for meetings. And then we can individually read about how this is identified in San Diego.
Support staff.
Yeah, so this is an example of one of the things that was kind of mentioned a little earlier in maybe in the previous phase, but there are some things which may fall into reporting and transparency, but it's up to the subcommittee whether or not to recommend that they go into code specifically. And I'm not exactly sure how these other jurisdictions do split their levels of law and regulation in terms of should something be in city charter, city code, in the bylaws of the oversight board itself, which it will develop, as soon as it's seated, in administrative rules, things like that. So just something to keep in mind as you go when it gets to the more granular things. Something to kind of keep in mind.
But I think, at least in my opinion, we should capture this though for our, because we might want to put in, say, in code, just several things like public input at every time there's an oversight body meeting, that they set aside some time for that. So so I don't know, so I would recommend capturing this one.
Okay.
Okay, so I think I'm G4. The oversight body meets regularly with the agency director, chief of police, and other officials. And then there's I researched Denver. I thought it was really interesting the way they have these key people at each of their oversight board meetings, so that they can discuss important issues out in the open.
Commissioner Christian?
Thanks. I feel like because the public is mentioned in here, it is mentioned in here. I didn't read that incorrectly, right? The public, yeah. Might be good to flag it as an option for inclusion. Obviously, we can change our minds later, but I feel like because it's mentioned, maybe we could flag it unless someone else has a strong, different feeling.
And I just know, like in Portland at the PCCEP meetings, quite often there are representatives from the police bureau there, and it's just having that access, you know, where a citizen committee can you know, ask questions and get information from the people who are running the police department, everything. It's just a great opportunity, and it makes things very open. Okay, so we're ready to move on to G5. The oversight body holds open meetings regularly and frequently. And then they have, so that's something, oh, I guess that'll be in the board membership board thing about how, if there's a minimum number of meetings that we think they need to hold together. But that's probably not our thing, so.
Shall
But I
we?
definitely think we need to capture the open meetings.
Was there a comment? So are you wanting this area highlighted? Yes. And I actually had a question about, I believe it was G3, I think it was, no, G2. Oh, G1, okay. Nope, we're good. I just wasn't sure if you had highlighted anything from the other one. There was one that I thought was skipped, but I guess I was incorrect.
Okay, G6. Hearings on individual cases are generally open to the public with limited specific exceptions defined in the law. This is below our examples identified in Maryland and Seattle.
Any questions or comments about this section, G6?
I definitely think we want to have our hearings on individual cases open to the public, unless there's a, you know, a really important reason why we shouldn't.
Well, it should probably be of the discretion of the like defendant, right? If they want it to be public.
I don't know. I mean, obviously, the one here, the Maryland example is if to protect the identity of a victim. So somehow, and it says defined in law, so somehow we'd have to figure out what kind of exceptions might be, because you can't, seems like you don't want to just say leave the door open, because then for having hearings not open to the public just based on somebody's opinion, it seems like you'd want to define that. But I definitely, I mean, I certainly have heard, you know, elsewhere through this process that people think it's important for the hearings on individual cases to be open for the public to observe.
So would you like to highlight this and
Yes.
then add a flag for discussion in terms of
And
finding
then
out the
somehow we'd have to figure out if
Yeah.
we're coming up with the information that leads to the code, what would be those exceptions?
And then I saw Commissioner Seamob and then Commissioner McDowell after.
And also in citing the second bullet for Seattle being a partial example, are we suggesting that if the officer chooses arbitration, that then they are not as well for us? Is that a suggestion or just a mention of like what their practice is?
So I was the one who researched Seattle, and I just think that's probably like their state laws around arbitration that make it so they're never open. And then they had that other process through, I think it might have been through like Civil Service Board or something, and those can be open to the public. So, but yeah, it wasn't like, I don't think it was up to whoever wrote the rules around their oversight board process. It was that's just the rules in the state of Washington about how arbitration works. Or could be collective bargaining. I don't know. It was something above and beyond what the city could decide.
What's my follow-up question would be like, what's the rule for us then? Are we legally bound by a similar thing? My preference would be that arbitrations would be public and not held in private, because there's a lot of arbitration that overturns things, and the devil's in the details that are hidden from us.
I don't know the answer. Oh, here, Samir does.
Yeah.
I don't actually know the answer to it, but what I can say is that arbitration is generally covered under state law. And so the capacity of the Police Accountability Commission to address that is maybe non-existent relative to the capacity of the oversight board to ask the city to, work on it with the state or ask the state directly, that sort of thing, as it relates to arbitration. And if your intention is to do the maximum or minimum of something that is allowable under law, there are other places in this where to the extent allowable by law has been used as a phrase to kind of simply go as far as can be gone, either in favor more or less of something like openness to the public could easily be open to the extent allowable. And then the other thing that may be worth mentioning is the highlighting I'm putting on the and co-chair, please let us know if this is the right way to do it, but putting the highlighting on the bolded section is designed to say that it's the concept that's being kept here, not necessarily the specific practice from the specific city or county. Okay, I'm seeing a thumbs up there.
Good.
I'd also like to, first I wanted to make sure that Commissioner McDowell, that your question was addressed or comment was addressed.
I was just going to say that I think that we had a similar provision in the officer accountability document relating to hearings. My recollection is that we talked about this and basically came up with sort of a similar should be open as to the greatest extent possible. But then maybe useful once we get sort of a draft outline here to just go back and double check our documents to see and just make sure what we've previously said in documents that have been approved we're carrying forward and maybe taking the next step on. But my recollection was that we had decided to get on the hearings process to ensure the greatest transparency possible under law.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner McDowell. And I'll say that Commissioner Samir asked to have it flagged for further discussion, and then I'll read from the Q&A. Commissioner Handelman actually had some answers for us. The first answer was CC3A, an officer accountability session about public meetings of the board, and then The next answer was the board will hold open hearings on misconduct, complaints, and investigations. The hearing shall be recorded in limited specific circumstances defined by state or federal law. Parts of the hearing can be held without being open to the public. 3 examples, examples of reasons to close the hearing to the public include to protect the identity of victim or private medical information. 4, while details protected in closed session are confidential, decisions shall be made publicly. Thank you.
Okay, well, that confirms my recollection. Thanks, Dan.
So it seems like we have that covered. So do we still flag it for this just because we decide it's okay to have redundancies? I guess I'm asking that of staff, what the vision is here.
It's up to you, but unless there's a reason that it's necessary, it might save time not to duplicate it.
Sounds good to me. Because it does seem like it's well articulated in that other part. I mean, the other subcommittee.
Commissioner Seamob, does that sound good to you too, since you asked for the flag? Okay. All right, I guess we can move on.
Okay, so the oversight under reporting, J, the oversight body and agency are required to regularly and frequently issue public reports. And then go ahead and look at the examples. I noticed Denver, look at that. They have, when they issue their annual report, then they set aside a meeting specifically designed for public comment on the report. So that seems like something we want to think about duplicating here.
So do you want that one specifically highlighted?
I think that'd be good. Yeah, I just think that's kind of a, and then the main, yeah.
And then Commissioner Seamob?
Should we also state what the city of Portland does within this list? Because I know the city of Portland does also issue an annual use of force report. There are a few other things maybe, but I don't quite remember. Or is there like a list of what the city of Portland and PPP already do that have already been identified or determined?
So right now, the IPR does an annual report, and then they do these quarterly reports that are more like little flyers. There isn't a lot in them. And then they have a dashboard. So the idea is you're supposed to be able to go to the website, find up-to-date information. And then I know there's the use of force report that's required by the settlement agreement, and it's produced by the police bureau. So it seems like my sense is we're supposed to be thinking about what the new oversight body is responsible for, and the police bureau still will, based on what city council tells them, or the Department of Justice or whatever, they're responsible for their own reports. But and a long time ago, IPR used to do a very comprehensive annual report, and then they did and if I remember right, their quarterly reports were pretty, multiple pages. But then again, they did scale those back some time ago. So that's That's about all I know about that.
So I was just gonna read into record what staff said. The first few sections that were numbered 3, 2, 1 with numbers on the back is what IPR already does. Is what Portland already does. And then that's Portland City Code. Just to have some clarification.
Maybe we're ready for the next one.
Yep, J2. Annual reports of the oversight body and oversight agency have required contents, which are defined by law. By listing specific reporting requirements in the code for agency and commission reports, it ensures the same type of information will be available to the public and to others over time. This facilitates year-to-year comparisons and reliable access to information. Examples from Seattle, San Diego, San Francisco, Philadelphia, New York, San Diego County.
Can we scroll up just a little bit so we can get the last bit? Thank you.
Well, I definitely vote for putting this in our things to include in our areas of agreement. And I was talking about how I was thinking that we might want to put in code a base of things that need to be included in the annual report. There looks like there's some good ideas in these examples here that we might want to borrow.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions or any other comments about any of these different jurisdictions?
There's some comments in the Q&A.
Okay. Would you like me to read them into record?
Sure.
Okay, well, we'll start with Jasmine. IPR used to have a dedicated data specialist. The person moved into a different position, and I don't know who is doing the work now, but it may be helpful to speak to someone of the data specialists employed by the city if you're looking to consolidate.
It's a good suggestion. Or those are from a previous item. Oh,
items.
sorry.
Yeah. Thank you, staff.
Okay, I think then we can move on to the next.
So the 13 or J3. Ooh.
I thought it was 13 too. J3, reporting on closed cases includes all information except complainant names in specific situations identified in Washington, D.C., San Francisco, Philadelphia, and Seattle.
You may need to scroll up a tiny bit. I think there might be more at the bottom. Yeah. Any comments on this section? Questions?
I again researched Seattle. I was really impressed with the they have a whole description of the cases and then of each case, what happened, and then all of the outcomes and everything. And I just thought that, and then they have it posted right on their website. So if you're really interested in the kinds of cases they look at, it's right there for you to see, and then what the eventual conclusion was. So I was pretty inspired by that when I saw it. But I definitely think we need to keep this idea in our areas to include. Okay, anybody else have anything they want to make note of in this section?
I don't see any. I see people might still be reading. Can't quite tell. Nope. Okay. Maybe we can move on.
Okay, I think, yeah.
And that would be you, Debbie, I believe, Commissioner Debbie, J14 or J4.
Okay, J4. I know it's hard to, a little bit hard to read. The oversight body maintains an online tracker of commission policy recommendations, including their responses and implementation. And this is another thing that I found in Seattle that I thought was really impressive. They even had, so this community police commission would make recommendations, and then they tell you, what the recommendation was and what came of it. Of course, sometimes nothing, but then they even tell you what the barrier was to nothing happening with that recommendation or it being rejected. And so you really had a good idea of, what was recommended and why possibly nothing happened to it. So I thought that was really something to hold on to for our system, to consider for our system.
So highlight the Seattle. The example. Move on to J5.
5.
Oh, wait, sorry. I see you. Commissioner
Sorry, my
Snob. Sorry.
brain tracks and works slow. And I do a little bit of Googling to make sure I'm going to ask the right question. Like, but regarding the Seattle example, is there like data as to, or maybe is it something like we should look into as far as like before they had that versus after the implementation of that, how it affected upholding police misconduct complaints and stuff?
Well, that's an interesting idea. And this
Probably
is
something to flag.
I was just gonna say-
yeah. Okay, yeah, sounds good. And this is more though, these were policy recommendations, so and kind of related to individual complaints, but more, bigger policies, and then they would recommend it to the chief or whoever, and then they would explain, on their tracker how come they weren't adopted, or if they were, that they would go on from there. And I can't remember exactly what they said about whether or not then they were able to say, and this is why it made things better. Yeah, it's easy to find though, if you got time to check on the Seattle website.
Yeah.
Did you
I'm
want that
bookmarking
flagged?
actively?
Commissioner Seymour, did you want that flagged?
I'm good.
You're good? Okay. Can we move to J5? Okay. And I believe that's you, Connie.
J5, online reporting includes complaints, findings, outcomes, and discipline, as well as aggregated data. identified in New York, San Francisco, and Philadelphia.
I think we should highlight that one.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm J6. The oversight body can propose the release of otherwise confidential information. And then there's examples, New York City. So in terms of transparency, this seems like a good idea.
Okay. W, oversight agency, community engagement. W1, the oversight body conducts public education on the role of the oversight system and community members' rights, as identified in Washington, D.C., San Diego, and San Francisco, and New York.
Support staff.
Yeah, I just wanted to flag it. I'm not 100% sure, and this was flagged up above as a thing to figure out whether this is something the oversight agency subcommittee should be talking about versus this one.
Yeah. Would agree.
And this is the last part of the officer accountability document. I know we're getting close to time here, so just should we go up to barriers and best practices or subject matter experts, co-chairs?
I think subject matter experts makes the most sense right now.
Practices to consider from subject matter experts. A2, the oversight body should be independent of the police department. This one was proposed by NACO.
And so the reason I included this is just that one little phrase there, and not keep secrets for law enforcement. I'm not sure how you would say that. Or if it goes in the code, if it's just something that a value of the oversight board and the agency, but so other thoughts would be welcome, because again, I spotted that and I just thought it might be useful to keep.
This is not even, oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Yep, I see your hand.
Something like maybe along the lines and grant no, God, I had the word in my head. I had the whole thing in my head and it just went away. Yeah, sorry. It was something along the lines of like rejiggering the word around that, but and shall not allow yeah, I had something good, but it's gone. I'll let you know when it comes back.
Yep. Come back. Yep. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, and then the next one, A3, this is really kind of the bold part really isn't particularly relevant, but there's this passage about state laws already afford extraordinary protections to law enforcement officers and conceal extensive information regarding their work from the public. And again, I sort of was just, it seemed like something to keep in mind, but I wasn't quite sure what to do about it as far as our job on the reporting and transparency subcommittee. But I thought you should see it anyway. So
And
maybe,
just,
oh,
go
go ahead,
ahead.
I'm sorry.
oh, I was also wanted to let folks know that in like about 2 minutes, we will have to transition if it's okay with the commission, of course, because you have a couple more things that you need to discuss. The basically your who do you want to brief is the next thing that we should go to. And then,
Maybe
of course, public comment.
I was gonna say, maybe in the last couple of minutes, I was gonna say, everybody on this subcommittee should, if you think of things that we didn't capture, I mean, we have well more to do at our next meeting, but you know, new ideas are welcome to add to our list. So if you think of anything related to reporting and transparency that we're not getting out of this stuff, then you should, you know, make sure to be ready to share it. And then the other thing is, if anybody has time between now and the next meeting, I think it would be good to start coming up with a list for what we might want to require in the annual report or whatever the periodic report our agency is going to be required to make. Because I think it'd be, again, good to put that in the code as they mentioned in that one of those earlier points. So anything else, Co-Chair Connie, that you would like to say, or anybody else?
I appreciate this very like sort of granular, you know, pulling of specifics. I think there is maybe for me a slightly missing piece, which is the like overarching goals of reporting and transparency. So anyway, just something to consider, and I'll spend a little bit more time thinking about that and email people before our next meeting regarding that.
Co-Chair Faith, you had your hand up as well.
I am not a co-chair.
Oh, sorry.
That's
Sorry. I'm
okay.
so used to calling you that.
I know,
Commissioner.
gladly I relinquish that title. I am following up with Co-Chair Debbie's comment. I would like to take a crack at what we would include in reporting requirements by the next meeting. So I volunteer to do that.
And I just saw something else that Commissioner Faith mentioned over the weekend and came up during our pre-meeting today is, if somebody has time, if anybody knows where Samir told me they're working on the list of things that they've heard at the community engagement sessions. And so once that's ready for someone to go through and pull out things related to reporting and transparency that we can throw into our bin here of things to put in the areas of agreement, that would also be good. But I think Samir said that that's a work in progress right now, of taking all those comments and putting them in one place.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Commissioner Iona. And then I think at this point we can just move on to a roundtable discussion, the quick and dirty roundtable discussion of who you would like to brief. This discussion is around round robin, so it's designed to have all members speak once and provide their ideas, thoughts, or both questions. Each member has up to 2 minutes, and I'll be calling on members to speak. After everyone's spoken, we can move on. Please feel free to pass if you need more time to think, and I'll come back to you. So, and of course, be kind to each other, and all the lovely rules and regulations that we have for discussion is also applied here, including a weighted stack. But I will first ask who would like to start. Christian, co-chair, or excuse me, Commissioner Christian.
It's the lowly commissioner now.
Yep.
I was just gonna suggest that we perhaps put on the list the person from the IPR that was commented. It was in the comment earlier, so I can't form my words. They have a dedicated data specialist. I took a note on it. I don't know who that would be, but we could look into that because that person's I think might be helpful, and I think it's a good suggestion.
I believe there was a data specialist from the city. Yeah. Let's see, Commissioner Seamob. Okay, Commissioner Faith. Commissioner McDowell.
So the two ideas on my in my mind, or the two thoughts I had, are potentially somebody from like the city auditor or somebody from her office. I'm thinking about that because of the recent proposal for someone to lead on transparency in the city. So it seems clear that she's championing the issue around transparency. And so many of our models that we've looked at have had the auditor or somebody in that position as functioning as an inspector general to help on this work around accountability, particularly on the transparency front. I think in some ways I feel like accountability is a really big piece of that, is breaking that code of silence. And I mean, I think that's just core to the accountability function. So I have a sense that the auditor's office, the auditor herself, may have something to say to us that would be useful. And the other idea I had was just somebody from the city attorney's office who could help us understand limitations around our ability to conduct basically to carry out our intentions to have as much of this happen in the public view and the public realm as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner McDowell. Commissioner Iona.
So I noticed Jasmine from KBOO reminded us that Casey Jones used to be the analyst at IPR and now works in the auditor's office. So that might be the perfect person to invite.
Thank you, Commissioner Iona. And Commissioner Connie, should I get you? Are you good? Okay, I think everybody got a chance to speak, and if not, okay, I just want to double check. Is it okay if was there Commissioner Iona, because I did not ask you specifically, was there anyone else that you can think of that you might want to hear from briefing from?
I'm so worried about our deadline that the thought of taking up time with anybody that wasn't absolutely necessary just doesn't appeal to me.
Okay, so then I guess we'll move on to next steps. Oh, staff.
Yeah, if scheduling is a challenge, of course, but it's also possible to ask if there's maybe anything written that we can ask them too. So if there's anyone that comes to mind that maybe you're concerned we wouldn't have time for, it's still worth mentioning, just so that we can ask them questions too, and I can source that as well.
Thank you, staff. And if we're going on to next steps, that would be you again. I'd like to pass it back over to you.
Yeah, so there's the next meeting is a week from today. Following that will be a longer break of 10 days between meetings, and then another week before the last currently scheduled meeting on the 23rd. So 2 Mondays, then 2 Thursdays. From now until the next meeting, and a few of the members and co-chairs have already mentioned this, thinking about what new ideas or new sources of information may be worth bringing into this to kind of continue populating the document we've just been looking at would be really helpful. And new ideas, and it means anything that isn't necessarily being done in another jurisdiction or recommended by a previous subject matter expert, but maybe it's just something that an individual member would like to see. And then that, as Commissioner Faith mentioned, the list of minimum requirements for inclusion into reporting, which may be different based on the audience for that reporting or the timeline, and just kind of as you're thinking about that, maybe this is something that you should put into the report that goes to this person, but not necessarily to that, or this is quarterly, this is annual, that sort of thing, is all helpful to look at. And then just to go back to the document really quickly, there are still a couple sections which we have not yet gotten through, which will probably come up in the next meeting. So if you just maybe take a chance to read that, and it has to do with the practices to consider from subject matter experts, as well as the barriers and best practices document, both from the fact-finding phase. And there's also a section down at the bottom, which are having to do with things that were in the officer accountability document, which will be circulated in advance of the next meeting. So this is more of a request to read it over and be prepped for the next meeting on that, as well as to come back with anything that makes sense to bring into the conversation, either a new document or a new idea, specifically focused on the minimum requirements for reporting.
Thank you, staff. And if with the commissioner's consent, or we'd like to go to public comment. We'll now take public comment on the issue of the subcommittee and is discussing, or community members can also tell their story about policing and police accountability. We ask members of the public to keep their comments or questions to 2 minutes in length and raise their hand in Zoom if they'd like to speak. Okay, I see a hand. Who is it? Okay, we'll start with Jasmine from KU. Sorry. Oh, do I? There we go. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Jasmine.
No worries. Hey, everybody. So I just wanted to say that I heard Co-Chair Connie's comment about kind of like a larger picture of what you want to accomplish with your transparency posture. And one of the things to think about is, one of the reasons I know Casey Jones is because back when Constantine Severe was the IPR director, I used to just be able to email him and ask him for information about the data that they were working with. And over time, that became a process where I had to start submitting a public records request to get access to that information. And public records requests represent significant barriers, both to journalists, but also to just general members of the public. So to think about kind of what you can make available to people without with minimal barriers to access to that information, it would be one of my suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you. And is it Raquel Silver?
Yes, following the last speaker, I would just like to emphasize that as long as you're looking at openness, you need to look at, or you should consider looking at, accessibility to different populations, hearing impaired, people with can't see, people living on the street, or how are these people supposed to get information? So if you could please consider that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner Handelman, or Dan Handelman, since you were in the public.
Hi, yeah, this is Dan Handelman. I am a member of the commission. I'm commenting tonight, not as a member of your subcommittee, but I guess broadly speaking, first of all, the document that you were looking at tonight, I did not find it on the website. And since I'm not on the subcommittee, I didn't get sent a copy of it ahead of time. So it would be nice to have that so I can give more thorough comments. But in some of the cases where you went through jurisdictions or other suggestions, you highlighted a general idea, but not any of the specifics underneath it. So for instance, as Commissioner Aiken's going through to find things that should go in the annual reports, those are listed in those other jurisdictions. So it'll be a good starting point. So you don't have to think of it out of thin air. So I hope that you don't, just because it's not highlighted, I hope you don't ignore the stuff that was done in the research phase. I noted in the Q&A that IPR does monthly reports to the Citizen Review Committee that it took a long time for us to get them to do them in writing, and they sometimes actually include important information. So don't forget the idea of maybe monthly reports to the board as well. I am hoping that you reconsider taking the outreach stuff out and leaving it to the commission or to the new board to figure out, because if it's not listed, they won't do it. And even if it is listed, they might not do it, because if you look carefully, the annual and quarterly reports are supposed to be developed with the Citizen Review Committee, which hasn't happened for many, many years. So at least putting it in writing gives you a leg up to having it happen. Yeah, and I agree with Commissioner Iona that their timeline is so tight now that if you can do interviews with people or written questions outside of meetings, that probably be the best use of your time collectively, so you have time to talk with each other. Thank you very much for all your hard work.
Thank you. And just to answer Commissioner Handelman's question about the notes, it's in the fourth link under co-chair notes online. So it can be found if you go there. Okay. So garden plot recap. Do the staff or the other facilitator have any garden plot items? Okay, none from you and the staff.
Yeah, one thing, and it's the question that is kind of ended up being moot for this document, but will be useful in another point, which has to do with state law around arbitration. Thank you.
Okay. I just have in my notes just the different folks that the commission is asked to possibly speak to, a data specialist, the auditor, and Casey Jones, just to follow up on those. And that's all I have. So I guess we are, thank you. It's thank you time. Just a reminder, you can submit advanced public comment to the Police Accountability Commission via web form, voicemail, or postal mail. The addresses are on the screen. Let's see, it's a tinyurl.com/Portland PAC comments for the online web form. Voicemail 503-823-3346, and of course by postal mail, Police Accountability, City of Portland Commission, City of Portland Community Safety Division, PO Box 9065, Portland, Oregon 97202. We'd like to thank the members of the commission for their hard work in attending the meeting today and their contributions. We'd like to thank the interpreters, and finally thank the members of community for attending and contributing your thoughts and questions. The next meeting is scheduled for next Monday for this subcommittee, March 6th. It is now 9:04. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much.